So without further ado, we're going to kick off the conversation on where the jobs are. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and we'll see how it flows from there. So my first question is, my first question goes to Ms. Akintinde. So, the UN estimates that Nigeria will need to create 11 million jobs per year to address its unemployment crisis. That's a total of 42 million new jobs to keep up with our constantly rising population. So as the Lagos State ES for the Employment Trust Fund, do you think we can transform employment opportunities to provide, to keep up with the rising population right now?
Okay, so I think the first unpopular opinion is we're certainly having too many children, right? So I think it's going to be incredibly difficult if you're growing your population at 3 to 4% annually to create jobs for what is already a large base of 180 million people. And you also have to situate that conversation in terms of the infrastructure deficit that we've been given over the last 16 years, right? So you have a country that has limited power, no rail infrastructure, bad roads. So it's a fairly difficult task, right? But I think that the recovery conversation has begun. And over the last 3.5 years, there's investment in the right things, right? So there's investment in social impact programs, for example, things like feeding children at kindergarten to primary school, very important, right? Because we're in Lagos. Lagos is a misnomer. But you need to get these kids educated. You need to get them in schools. You need to provide an incentive for their parents to send these kids to schools. Now, providing meals to kids is that incentive. You also need to train these people, right? I work in a fund that tries to train and place unemployed Lagos residents, right? We've trained 3,500 people. It's a small number. We certainly need to grow that to 300,000 people. But there's capacity to take those people. So I think a growing economy underpinned by infrastructure development certainly gives you a platform to employ people. If we get our growth above 6%, and in this case, inclusive growth, right? So you need to understand that first, our economy was driven by what was effectively oil sector growth, right? Which doesn't really put many people in jobs. Now, if you start to focus on inclusive growth, agriculture, manufacturing, things like business process outsourcing, you start to increase broadband penetration, there's certainly an opportunity to create jobs for 40 to 50 million people over the next 10 years. So I think the building blocks have been done, right? In the last 3.5 years, I think there's been a lot of investment in the right things. If you ask me where I think the next level is, it's in building things around technology. It's in ensuring that state governments, don't charge exorbitant fees for broadband operators to lay fiber, right? It's in getting fiber to the kid in Kaura Namoda. It's in democratizing access to the internet, the access you have in Lagos to that kid in Jos. That's where we should be going to, right? So I think the opportunity is definitely there. Nigeria has some upsides. We have a relatively young population, and contrary to what we think, we actually have a fairly skilled population. And I'll close with this point. So if a year ago, I met a gentleman, Israeli guy, who came into Lagos and said, I want to set up a call center in Lagos, but I need 500 qualified people. So tell me, why should I come to Lagos and not Kigali or Johannesburg or Cairo, right? And this guy, I actually thought he was a Mossad agent, deadpan, completely serious. So I made a pitch to him and said, we'll get you 1,000 people. Like, there's talent here. 6 months later, I don't know why he believed me. He believed the story, but they wanted 350 people to start. They had 2,000 qualified CVs, right? Now they've grown that business to 700 people. There's no reason why Nigeria cannot be the business process outsourcing capital of the world. There are only two things we need now: broadband and power. So the talent is here. There's no doubt about that. So the jobs will come.
So my next question is to you. We talked about the population explosion, yeah? So the population increase is almost evenly divided amongst gender lines. How do we transform employment opportunities to be balanced and inclusive enough to address the gender gap that we currently have in the labor market?
I think it all begins with mindset and cultural issues. Growing up in the rural parts of Nigeria, a lot of people have this mindset that women should not be educated, or they'll rather send their children that are men to school as opposed to sending their women to school. And that's where it starts from. If you're not educated, how are you going to solve a problem? How are you going to create employment? How are you going to develop your country? So I think it starts with education. But when people are educated, like when people get educated, then there's no opportunities that they cannot take advantage of. But the problem begins with people in the communities, people in those rural areas, the government needs to empower people. They need to understand that they cannot leave the 50% of the population uneducated and 50% of the population not working. Husbands also need to empower their wives. Women need to take responsibility for themselves, take advantage of the opportunities that are available in the country. For example, I know so many women who see opportunities and they don't take advantage of them. There are a lot of platforms that have been created, platforms like the Opportunity Desk. I created one, the AGS Tribe, that's democratizing opportunities for entrepreneurs. But these people don't even believe, especially the women. So I started creating a movement, letting them know that these opportunities are available for you. Africa, all eyes are on Africa now. People are looking at Africa. Like they said, there's talent. He's helping the government run Empower. They've created 500,000 jobs, and that's only one initiative. How about getting the education that you need so that you can take advantage of these opportunities to advance yourself to the next level?
Okay, so you talked about women not taking advantage of the opportunities, but I would want you to talk more about the system that sort of hinders women from taking up those opportunities, because when we talk about taking up education, we're mostly referring to, the lower class, because at the middle class and the upper class, they have more opportunities, they have more exposure, but, we're targeting the lower class. How does the system play a role in hindering women? Do you believe it does?
I think the government or the system doesn't really benefit women. For example, something happened recently of people who were sexually abused. And this issue is a very, very strong issue. Some people cannot even come out to talk about these things because men or people who are sexually abusing these people shut them up. And when you go to government and say, okay, this is happening, if those people have more authority over these women or these people don't have people backing them up, then they cannot speak up. So it starts with, the system doesn't really help people, but women, as women, we need to come together and have a voice. If we have that voice, we'll be able to take advantage and not let people bully us into doing those things that we don't want to do. But now people are speaking up. There are different instruments that people can use. People are using social media to talk about these issues that are going on. So if we use our voices, then we can take advantage of these opportunities, and those people wouldn't bully us because everybody has access to things like social media.
Thank you. So